Next team, if we're going alphabetically, would be who? The
Oh,
Milwaukee
why you have
Bucks.
to put me on the spot? It's too hard. Yeah, Milwaukee's next. They're of the four, they're the least interesting. I just think because like we might not even be talking about them if Khris Middleton had just been healthy. They would still be playing potentially. I mean, they went to seven without their I think their second best, obviously their second best offensive player, their third most important player. Um, so having said that, I think his absence did expose what they need, and that's just another playmaker. If it's a two-way wing, awesome. If it's just someone else that can pierce the defense, score, or find someone open, I think that's what it takes. Because we saw, Drew Holiday, I think, did the right thing against Boston, and he took a lot more shots than he normally would. I think you could see him realizing this is a bad shot, but I have to take it because we don't have anyone else that's going to, get something markedly better than this at this point in the shot clock or whatever. And if Giannis is off the floor, just forget it. So I think they have to, and not a lot of resources. They've got to upgrade the George Hill spot. If that playmaker is another backup point guard, great. But they just need someone else to create shots. I think in that offense, because Giannis is phenomenal. Sometimes that's all it takes, but against the best defenses, and Boston was like the best defense. You just need that one more guy. And even if Middleton's back, I still think that's a need for them.
Right. I think we kind of saw people are probably too down on Grayson Allen in the sense that what did you expect Grayson Allen to be? It's not
Right.
that player. It's not going to be George Hill. I thought Javon Carter should have gotten more run towards the end, but it wasn't for like the shot making element of it. And I don't really know how you go out and get that advantage creator because they have no money to work with. Like you're going to have the mid level is going to be their best spending tool. And hey, are they gonna spend it? Because you have Pat Connaughton as a player option and Bobby Portis as a player option. I would expect both of them to decline theirs. Pat Connaughton, the way he closed the postseason and how important he was in Milwaukee, he should absolutely decline his player option. Are you going to pay to keep those guys around? We could be talking about a team that's actually shallower. And so that was my question of just like, what are they willing to do to improve this team? But my other question was like, how much do they need I saw like a lot of, if they didn't get rid of PJ Tucker, maybe that series plays out differently. I know offense was their problem. I actually don't disagree with the take because of the Giannis, like those lineups where Giannis is your primary big, so to speak, without Portis or Brook Lopez on the court. I still think those give you the best chance to just steamroll everybody else. You didn't have the guy, especially without Middleton, to kind of fill that spot to make that lineup make so much sense. Whereas PJ Tucker would have given you that. Can you go out and like imagine they were able to sign like an Otto Porter in free agency? That's someone who opens up more time for those lineup combinations. And it's interesting. I'm just curious to see what they prioritize versus talent retention because there's Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton hitting free agency. And then there's also just, it doesn't have to be either or. But when you're talking about the limited amount of resources that you have, it almost is either or. Where do they need someone who can unlock their most versatile lineups, or do they need more of that creator? Because at the end of the day, we also could say, yes, I know Khris Middleton was injured, but you have Drew Middleton and Giannis to have to prioritize another that offensive creator seems almost excessive. But injuries crop up, and we know that when things slow down, like Drew Holiday, you probably want Khris Middleton going through the half court motions a little bit more than Drew Holiday. And I agree with what you said about Holiday maybe not wanting to take those shots, but he could have toned down the early shot clock contested jumpers. That I will die on that hill.
No, you're not wrong. Just like a couple housekeeping things because I was looking while you're talking. So they got bird rights on Connaughton. So if it like they can pay, they can beat the market if they need to. The question is, will they? Or obviously, because it's Milwaukee, and they're very very much committed to high dollars to their three best players. Portis, I think he's got a player option. You're totally right. He's going to decline that, but he can come back. They can pay him basically 2 years for 22.5 million. So that's right around mid-level exception money. I don't think Portis is going to get more than that from anybody else. So I think both should be back. One guy, just this is kind of like I don't know, fanciful idea, but they don't have a lot of resources. This may be a minimums, type of thing, or at the most the taxpayer mid-level if they even choose to spend that. But someone, you're going to laugh, someone like Ricky Rubio, distressed asset coming off a major injury. I was looking at sort of his profile in his like 30 or so games with Cleveland this year. Of guys that drove at least 12 times a game, his assist rate, there aren't that many of those guys. There's 20 or 30. His assist rate's like top 5. So if you just want a guy to get in the lane and find somebody open, which is sort of what you got to do for your secondary scoring with the Bucks, because they're just going to keep employing guys like Wes Matthews and Grayson Allen that are going to be catch and shoot types. I think Rubio, or a Rubio type that can just get into the defense and move the ball, you could get that guy pretty cheap. And honestly, I think Rubio is an upgrade over George Hill. Like, the idea of George Hill has always been great, but I would, again, he played 76 minutes against the Celtics, scored 5 points and had 3 assists. Like, just nothing. So you need more than nothing from your backup point guard, even on a team with all the creators you mentioned, the high-end creators you mentioned. They just need more than that. So Rubio, just take your veteran free agent point guard that can get into the lane and find a shooter. Like, take your pick. Like, that type of guy, I think, is gettable for the minimum.
Yeah, coming off the ACL injury for sure. I thought about the 2 names that sprung to mind for me were, and I don't know this. And by the way, with Connaughton and Portis, it wasn't. They can keep them. They're into the tax without those guys on the books. They're below the apron, but into the tax. I'm just curious what their break number is there. I thought about, and I don't know if these guys will be too expensive for what the Bucks to spend, but like a DeLon Wright or even a Dennis Schroeder at this point. 2 very different players, obviously, but Dennis Schroeder will get you into the lane. Are either of those guys going to fall into the mini level territory? And before anyone laughs, like, most of the teams, if you're not a cap space team, like, there are a lot of teams that are only going to be working with part of the MLE or the mini MLE. Like, there's even the full MLE is not just available in like this huge supply. And I don't know if either of those two, Atlanta should probably keep DeLon Wright, but I just don't know how this market is unlike any other I can remember in free agency, to where if you told me that DeLon Wright signed for the mini MLE, I wouldn't be shocked.
No, DeLon Wright is someone that I am like, whenever I'm doing work that requires me to think of like who's like an on the quote unquote on the cheap guy that could really help a team, he always comes up, and he's going to constantly come up because he can guard 3 positions, and he's kind of a point guard, and he's a good enough 3-point shooter that he fits everywhere. I mean, he would be forget Rubio. If the Bucks could somehow fit him into that, 6.4-ish million taxpayer slot and are willing to do that, he would be a huge upgrade over Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it might be hard to find like someone who isn't an upgrade over Hill.
We've been rough on old George on this one. We should leave him alone.
I also wonder, do they decide like maybe this can be done via trade, but they don't have the pick equity to get it done, even though they do have some of the middle rung salaries. When you look at George Hill is $4 million next year, Grayson Allen is 9.4. I'm assuming that their top 4 guys are just going to be off the table. And that includes Brook Lopez, although maybe they'd be more open to try. If you're bringing back Portis, do you think that, I mean, Brook was huge for them at points during the postseason after he came back from his back injury. They're even independent of the needs we're talking about. They're just so shallow to where they almost, to me, you can't let Pat Connaughton leave. Like, you need to bring him back. I would probably lean you need to bring Bobby Portis back as well. And then it's like Wes Matthews is kind of just floating around out there. No, you don't want him playing 80 minutes a game again, but he was incredibly important to what they were doing by the end of the season, and he's going to be a free agent. Maybe we're misreading these guys too, because Wes Matthews didn't have a team to start the year. Then he finished as probably like the Bucks' like 3rd or 4th or like 4th most important player with the Middleton injury in that final series.
It's really hard to judge Matthews on the Boston series, but there were a lot of moments where, like, the second he put the ball on the floor, it was just like, well, this has become a bad possession because he's not going to finish, and he's not going to do anything productive if he's not just catching and shooting. They need like the 31-year-old version of Wes Matthews. That's the guy they need. Those guys are, that's a 3-and-D wing so everybody needs one of those.
And any of the dreams of like, maybe we can get Rocco for the mini MLE out the window because he extended. This free agency class is it's going to be rough.